Timothy Alberino is the author of Birthright, The Coming Posthuman Apocalypse, and the Usurpation of Adam's Dominion on Planet Earth. He recently returned from an investigation to Peru where he interviewed villagers associated with an abduction event of females and others in the remote Amazon region of Peru, and he's here to talk about it today with us on Exopolitics Today.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, welcome, Timothy. Glad to have you back on Exopolitics Today.
Dr. Salla, always a pleasure.
So you have been very busy, and I know you've gotten back from a number of Central American, South American countries, and one of those was Peru, where you went to investigate. So for people who maybe don't know what happened in Peru that kind of like compelled you to go there and investigate, why don't you kind of give people a quick summary of what it was that happened there over the last few months?
Okay, well, back in mid-July, between mid-July and the beginning of August, some very compelling videos began to surface on social media in which we saw villagers from the Peruvian Amazon in a state of chaos at nighttime, running around their village, discharging their firearms into the jungle. Subsequent interviews with the villagers revealed that they were under assault by some sort of a mysterious force, by mysterious assailants who some of them alleged were extraterrestrials, or at least they believed that they were extraterrestrials because of the incredible capabilities of the assailants. And this all began in a jungle village called San Antonio de Pintuyacu, which is located up the Pintuyacu River, about a 2-day journey from Iquitos, which is the primary city in the department of Loreto. And this occurred in the region of Alto Nanay. And subsequent to that video and that incident, other incidents began to break out in the Peruvian Amazon. Basically the same phenomenon, but with some different details. For example, there was one incident in which a couple of people were allegedly being attacked by a UFO that was deploying some sort of a light at them, a laser beam or light at them that was trying to apparently lift them off the ground. There were some individuals who were attacked by lasers. There was a group of students who, in the same region, while they were out doing something for their college, encountered the strange being walking through the jungle. So there was a series of incidents that were happening around the same period of time. But it was this particular incident in San Antonio de Pintuyacu that sort of kicked off the media frenzy. The Peruvian media took the stories very serious, especially the one from San Antonio de Pintuyacu. No one had actually traveled to the village to conduct a thorough investigation. Two police officers did respond initially. They had to go and investigate the attempted abduction of a 15-year-old girl named Talia. So they responded to the abduction attempt. They went out there to conduct a very preliminary investigation. They had a Navy escort with them, but the police officers conducted what I would consider to be really a piss-poor investigation and concocted a ridiculous fabrication. They said that the village was being assaulted by river miners with jetpacks, and that the river miners were attempting to scare the villagers and drive them off the land. I now know, and suspected early on, but I now know for sure that story is an utter fabrication. It is false. The villagers are offended by the notion that they're being attacked by river miners. And we now know also that the objective of the phenomenon is not to drive anybody off of the land. And we can discuss that, why I believe that. But that's how this whole incident began, how this whole phenomenon sort of resurfaced. This phenomenon is associated with what's called the pelata phenomenon, the face peeler phenomenon in the Peruvian Amazon, and it's that the face peeler phenomenon is probably goes back to the mid 80s, maybe early 80s. It's not an ancient thing. It's relatively recent, going back to early to mid 80s when it first began. And the indigenous communities of the Peruvian Amazon, they don't know who the face peelers are. They suspect one of two things: either they suspect that they're an international consortium of gringos who are conducting clandestine organ harvesting operations, or B, that they're extraterrestrials, that they're non-human entities, performing some sort of operation for unknown purposes. I would say that there's also a C option, in that both of these things are true. In other words, it's a cooperation between some human faction and extraterrestrial faction or non-human faction. I don't know that for sure, but I would certainly add that in as a possibility. So after all of these incidents erupted on social media, many people in my audience were asking me to go and investigate, because I had previously lived near this region of the jungle. I've been in this region of the jungle, but I lived up the river Masan, which is not far away. And for an extended period of time, that's where I learned to speak Spanish. I learned to speak their particular dialect of Spanish, which is called charapa, which mixes in a little bit of Quechua with Spanish. And so, I've contracted malaria 5 times from this region of the jungle. I'm very familiar with it. I was 19 years old when I was living in this area, so it would just seem sort of appropriate for me to go and conduct this investigation. And so ultimately I decided to mount the expedition. I was fortunate to be accompanied by my colleague, Doug Thornton, who is an ex-infantry Marine and DHS operator. And so I also had some help. I was able to co-fund the operation, the expedition. I had some friends of mine from Conduit Church in Tennessee who helped me co-fund the expedition, because what we ultimately ended up doing was we ended up provisioning the village, as well as conducting an investigation. We brought them food supplies, rice, beans, sugar, so on, as well as medical supplies and strategic technology. So it was kind of a complex ordeal, and thankfully we were able to get in there, conduct an investigation, and get out safely without any sort of incident.
So, I mean, this report that you released on YouTube, I mean, it's quite detailed in terms of exactly what happened and the images that you showed, and some things stood out to me. The firearms that the villagers carried. I mean, is that normal? I mean, do villagers in remote regions of Peru, I mean, are they always so well armed?
Well, it's normal for the villagers. It's an indigenous community, by the way. It's the Kitu people, a very old indigenous community, very important village, San Antonio de Pintuyacu. The members of these communities do carry shotguns. They have shotguns. They use them both for defense, but also for hunting. So that's not unusual. Although most of these guys only have a couple of cartridges. They don't have a whole lot of ammunition. But what is unusual is when I got to San Antonio de Pintuyacu, it took us 2 days to get there, going up the river from Iquitos. I was able to get a riverboat and fill it with all of our supplies and everything, get up the river. And when we arrived at the village, we were met at the shore by a small army of men with shotguns. That was very unusual. These guys were usually the villagers in these communities do not walk around with shotgun in hand, loaded. They have shotguns in their houses. They grab them when they go hunting, but they don't walk around day and night holding their shotguns. And that's the situation. That was the situation in San Antonio. So, as I said, when I arrived, I was met by a small army of guys with shotguns, loaded, and they were obviously in a heightened condition of vigilance. They were maintaining their arms throughout the day, loaded and ready to fire. So that is unusual.
Yes, that really did strike me looking at those images. I don't know if we can show one of those, but yeah, those villagers that greeted you all with arms, that was kind of like suggesting that they are kind of like very paranoid, or as you said, very vigilant about something. Something's happening there. And you did talk with the female you mentioned that there was an attempt to abduct her, and so yeah, you want to tell us, just kind of remind us what happened with
Yes.
her?
So the first thing we did, when we got to the village, we had a very warm welcome. We had a traditionally Kitu welcome. They did this dance for us, and it was really quite intriguing. And I, by the way, had an official invitation to go to the village. I had contacted the villagers before I went, and the Apu, the chief of the village, and his council actually sent me a written an official invitation in written form, and the Apu met me in Iquitos and went up the river with me. So he accompanied me on the riverboat I chartered up the river with a couple of other guys from the village. I also brought with me 2 active duty Navy jungle operators, Peruvian guys, who are Peruvian Navy guys. They accompanied me. They were armed as well. And when we got to the village after receiving this warm welcome by the Kitu community, we began our investigation in earnest. And basically, what we learned was quite it was quite harrowing. I was ready to. I had no idea what I was going to encounter in the village, what sort of story I was going to be told by the villagers. So I was prepared. I hadn't drawn any conclusions before I arrived. I was willing to hear whatever they had to tell me, even miners with jetpacks, should that be the actual story that came forward. But it wasn't. Rather, what was told to us was a situation. I'll describe. I'll try and encapsulate what I was able to gather through the testimonies the interviews that I conducted. I conducted many interviews in the village. Many guys wanted to talk to me and were very willing to tell me their stories, their encounters with this phenomenon. And so basically, the village, when we got there, there had been a month or two since these things had occurred. It was not actively happening in the village when we got there. We're coming after the incidents. So the village was being assaulted mid-July to early August by these very strange assailants who only operated at night. So as soon as the sun went down, that's when the activity would begin. And this went on for a few weeks consecutively. These assailants are dressed from head to foot in black armored bodysuits. They have strange helmets. They're wearing helmets that are elongated in the back. The helmets cover their faces. And they have these almond-shaped eye lenses, yellow tinted. They have hard shell backpacks, which we suspect might be battery packs or small reactors. And they have very strange footwear. Their footwear is not normal boots. On the bottom of their shoes, they have discs, 2 discs on each foot, one in the front, one over the heel. These discs enable them to float off the ground about a meter, and they can also perform some pretty incredible feats by way of these technological apparatuses on the bottom of their shoes. They can jump over houses, for example. We were told multiple people saw them leaping over houses. So whatever this technology is on the bottom of their footwear is quite advanced. But aside from the discs on the bottom of their shoes, the way they arrive to the villages, they come flying in the air, standing on top of circular hoverboard platforms. And these platforms have a series of lights, green and blue lights around them, maybe red as well, I don't remember. And they have the ability to they have floodlights, so they have the ability to switch on floodlights when they want to. These circular hoverboard apparatuses. Now, usually, what they would do is sometimes they would fly very low over the village, standing on top of these hoverboards, and the villagers would only realize that they were standing on top of them when they were close enough to illuminate them with their flashlights, because usually they would only see the lights, like almost like a drone. These circle of lights, but when they would put their flashlights on them, they would see these dark figures, these dark silhouettes sort of surfing on top of them. Now, it's important to understand that these hoverboards, these circular hoverboards, are completely silent. They make no sound except for when they accelerate off the ground, which they seem to make some sort of a compressed air sound. And the mode of operation, the way that these assailants would enter the village is they would hover above the village, and then they would land back in the jungle, in the openings between the trees. They would land these circular hoverboards, and then they would dismount. Usually they would dismount, come walking through the jungle or floating through the jungle, because remember, they have these circular discs on the bottom of their footwear, which I suspect magnetically snap into the hoverboards. That's what I suspect. And I suspect that the energy source that powers the hoverboards is being carried on their back, because when they snap into these hoverboards, or when they remount their hoverboards, they press a button on their shoe, on their footwear, that energizes the technology and allows them to lift off the ground. So it seems to me that they're carrying the technology on their bodies, probably in these backpacks, the energy source, and that there is some function, with just the discs on the bottom of their shoes. I hope I'm explaining this in a comprehensible way. But they were encountered by multiple people in the village, face to face, at nighttime, with flashlights. One individual told me, several guys shot at them. One individual told me that he shot at one of these guys point blank with a 16 gauge shotgun, birdshot. And the guy, he said, was hovering above the ground about a meter. Now this individual tells me that the assailant was dressed in a bodysuit, just as I described, but it was silver, which is sort of an anomaly. Everybody else told me they were dressed in black, but this guy swore to me this particular assailant was dressed in a silvered armored bodysuit. And he discharged his firearm point blank range. He hit the guy. He knows he hit him. He knows he hit the assailant because, again, the assailant's floating. The assailant fell back on his back, so he was knocked back, and then he just popped back up as if, it had really no effect. It just knocked him back, and he jumped back up into the air and floated away. And in fact, this individual who shot him told me that he could hear his birdshot dinking off of the armor that this assailant was wearing. So it's metallic armor. It's impervious, at least to birdshot, shotgun blast. It's advanced body armoring. And there were multiple encounters with these guys throughout these several weeks, that different villagers had different kinds of encounters, similar to what I just described. Some of them shot the guys, some of them just chased them. But they all saw the same thing. They all described exactly the same thing. And the girl that you're referring to, Talia, this 15-year-old girl, she had the most, she had the most direct confrontation, the most up close and personal confrontation with these assailants. Talia was just after dark. She was in her backyard. Now, you have to understand the terrain here. Talia's home is sort of in the middle of the village. There's other houses around the village, around hers, and between her house and the other houses, there's this sort of it's sort of like a little gully. It's forested. There's some jungle back there. It's almost like a backyard. There's a little chicken coop, thatch roof chicken coop back there. And yeah, you're showing pictures right now of Talia. That's that's her backyard. And to her left is this little gully and this little chicken coop. And surrounding are these, it's surrounded by these other houses. Now that's important because of what happens there. So Talia, just after dark, is in her backyard, knocking fruit down from a tree with this pole, with this long stick. One of the fruit falls to the ground. She bends down to pick it up, and there's some dead leaves, as you can see in the picture. There's some dead leaves on the ground, and she suddenly notices that the leaves begin to rustle, and she feels a gentle breeze at her back. She turns around, a gentle gust of wind. She turns around, and she sees one of these assailants that I've previously described. And she sort of did this motion, like surfing on one of these circular hoverboards. He flies up to her, right next to her, lands on the ground, and grabs her from behind. And he puts his hand over her mouth. Then she sees another one of these guys flying up the hill. He lands in front of her and grabs her feet. Then both of these assailants lift her off the ground and take her behind the chicken coop in this forested gully. Behind her house there. And now she refers to these individuals as gringos. The reason why she refers to them as gringos is because one of them, and gringo, by the way, just means a non-Hispanic person, usually someone of European or American descent. And she said that one of these individuals, the one she actually calls the gringo, was taller than me. I'm about 6'1", taller than me. The other individual was about my height. The one she calls a gringo, she calls him the gringo because she heard them speak. And they spoke Spanish. One of them, the gringo, had a broken accent. That's why she calls him the gringo. The other one spoke normal Peruvian Spanish. That's what she told me. And so they have her behind the chicken coop, and the Peruvian guy, let's call him the Peruvian face peeler, proceeds to take out this cream in this small canister and mix it with a powder. And then he sucks up this solution with the nasal syringe and shoots it up her nose, up both of her nostrils. As soon as he shoots this stuff up her nostrils, she started to go in she started to fall into sort of a semi-conscious state. Then they took a larger canister out, a tube, almost like a toothpaste tube, and they squeezed some other kind of cream in their hands. This was the gringo who had her from behind, remember, with his hand over her mouth. So he's proceeding now to smear this other cream on her face. And as he's doing this, she said she heard the Peruvian assailant say, "Be careful, don't put too much on her face. It's going to ruin the flesh." Or don't apply too much, it's going to ruin the flesh. Now, in a subsequent conversation I had with Talia, she explained to me that what they were saying was that the cream, if too much is applied, it's going to make it difficult to cut the skin off of the flesh, to separate the skin from the tissue beneath. That's what she said. Now, so they applied this cream to her face. Her face goes instantly numb. And then they proceed to take out this small device, which I believe is it's a laser scalpel based on the description. And they start making an incision. The gringo that's got her from behind starts to make an incision right under her jawline. And he actually makes two because she started to struggle at this point. And she's struggling, and she managed to get her hand up under his helmet, and start to lift up his helmet, which caused him to panic for a moment because he did not want her to see his face. So he panics for a moment. He's struggling with her. And one of these two guys slaps her in the face as she's doing this. And in the ensuing struggle, they lose control of her momentarily. She said they dropped her. And now she no longer has a hand over her mouth, so she lets out a blood-curdling scream. And when she does this, you have to understand that the villagers at this point are already in a state of vigilance, because this was not the first incident. There was an incursion that happened some time before this, and so the villagers were already aware that somebody is trying to make an incursion into their village at nighttime. And so they're already in a state of heightened vigilance. And so when Talia screams, remember, there's houses surrounding this sort of backyard area where she's at. Everyone comes running. Her brother's sitting on the porch. He's got his flashlight. Her neighbors are sitting on their porches. They've got their flashlights. As soon as she screams, they're on the scene in a matter of seconds. And they've got their flashlights. So this is where Talia's, well, there's one more detail from Talia's account before she goes unconscious. After she screamed, the Peruvian assailant, again, I'm calling him the Peruvian assailant just because from her description of the way they spoke, he starts to take off on his hoverboard and he yells back to the gringo, come on, let's go. We got to go. And he responds to her, allegedly, according to Talia, no, we can't just leave her here. And he proceeds to grab her by the hair and drag her up this little hill. Remember, it's a gully. He proceeds to drag her by her hair up this hill as if he's going to try and take off with her. But he doesn't get very far because the villagers are now on the scene the neighbors are on the scene with their flashlights. They train their flashlights on these assailants and they see them. Talia is now unconscious, laying on the ground with blood on her neck. And her brother and the neighbors see the assailants. They illuminate the assailants with their flashlights, and I talked to them, and they described exactly what Talia described. These guys were in black armored bodysuits, helmets, elongated helmets, sort of surfing on these circular platforms, these circular hoverboards. No sound, there's no sound until these guys sort of maneuver where there's an opening in the trees and they accelerate up into the air. And when they accelerate in the air, there's sort of that compressed air sound. But there's no, like, you know, it's not propellers or jets or anything like that. It's a very strange sound, right? That these guys tried to describe to me. So obviously they rescue Talia and treat her wounds. She's unconscious. She was taken to a village down, another village that had a better medical post, and they were able to treat her wounds. And also they, subsequent to treating her wounds, a few days later when they examined her, they diagnosed her with severe PTSD. And I can attest to the fact that girl, Talia, has severe PTSD. When I first encountered her in the village, it was during the day. It was in the evening. Everybody's playing volleyball and soccer in the plaza. When I encountered her, as soon as she saw, she started to tremble and cry and hide her face from us. And she took her hair and covered her face with it so we couldn't see her face. She was associating us with her assailants. And she was trembling and she did not want to talk to us. And eventually her father and the Apu convinced her to talk to us the next morning after breakfast. We went over there, and that's when Talia told me about what had happened to her.
Well, that's such a harrowing incident, but it does raise this connection with the pelacatas that you said, that began in the 1980s. And I mean, is this an example? I mean, I imagine people have been found dead with their face peeled, and in this case, Talia was able to escape that. So is this kind of like rare, people going through this kind of an attempt and surviving?
The pelacata phenomenon, this is typical of the pelacata phenomenon. I was told that during this period of time, there were a couple of fatalities. Not in that village. This is the first time that San Antonio had been attacked like this. But in the general region, now I did a video, I think before I came on your show talking about this, before I went on the expedition, I had published a video on YouTube in which me and Doug were analyzing this scenario that was unfolding. And this was back in August. And in that video, I feature a young man. There's a video that I feature in my video of a young man who's being pulled out of the river or unloaded from a boat on the shore of a river. And 2/3 of his face are gone. And all you see underneath is skeleton, the white skeletal structure of his face. And you can clearly see in the video, and it's still up on my YouTube channel, although it's been taken out of the algorithm by YouTube because it's age inappropriate or whatever. So they age restricted it, but it's there still on my YouTube channel. And you can clearly see in the video that the skin where the face has been removed is very cleanly cut. There's this very clean incision that's obviously been made. That is not the work of piranhas. That is not the work of depredation of any kind of predator, that is a face being cut off. Now, it could be with a sharp knife, could be with a laser scalpel. I had assumed that that incident had taken place somewhere in the Peruvian Amazon, in the general region of San Antonio Pintuyacu, but I wasn't sure. The villagers in San Antonio told me, yes, this did happen. It happened around the same time, and that individual, that young man, was found in basically the same region of the jungle. I have not been able to independently verify that yet, but according to the villagers in San Antonio Pintuyacu, that incident did indeed happen in basically the same region of the jungle in Alto Nanay. And that is typical of the face peeler phenomenon. So we can only assume that that is what was going to happen to Talia. Had these assailants been able to maintain control of her and finish the job, unfortunately, I think Talia's body would have been discovered in very similar conditions, with her face gone. So it's the face peeler phenomenon is exactly that. These guys are peeling faces. Now, I should say, whether or not this time these particular individuals are the actual face peelers of the same guys that have been doing this since the 1980s, or whether, or perhaps they may be mimicking the phenomenon to try, because they want the villagers to think that's who they are, to cover up whatever other activity they're doing. I don't know. I can't say. That's certainly within the realm of possibilities. But the phenomenon is very real. And obviously these guys, whoever they are, and I'm saying guys, look, I'm assuming they're humans. However, I should say that there are other possibilities in play here. As I always sort of, I always add this postscript when I tell the story about Talia. And Talia has undergone extreme trauma. She, as I said, she has severe post-traumatic stress disorder. She did have a substance shot up her nose, probably some sort of something that rendered her unconscious eventually. So it put her in an altered state of mind, whatever it is. It incapacitated her. So it is possible that Talia confabulated the voices that she heard. In other words, she confabulated the detail about them speaking, because she had previously believed that the face peelers, the pelacaras, were gringos. And so there may be some confabulation there, because it's an anomaly. No one else heard them speak. No one else heard these guys speak. And in fact, when I talked to some of the other villagers who chased them through the jungle, they said, one of the guys told me, look, these things don't move like human beings. He said they're more agile. Their way that they move, the speed, the agility is, in the way he told me was it's non-human. It's like, and we don't know how to explain it. And again, they chase them through the jungle. And by the way, they found their tracks. They leave these tracks in they're very large. All the guys said their tracks are really big, and they're two circles. So they're the discs on the bottom of their shoes. They leave these two circular tracks for each foot, and they're really big. Everybody stressed that to me. They're really big, and the assailants seem to be between 6.5, 7.5, even perhaps up to 8 feet tall. And that may be because of the technology that's in their footwear. Maybe it's giving them 6 inches height, right? Whatever this technology is it's on the bottom of their shoes. Or it may be that maybe they're not humans, or maybe they're not normal humans. Maybe we're dealing with super soldiers. Maybe, I don't know. And of course, I'm just spitballing here. This is rank speculation on my part, but maybe we're dealing with reptilians. Maybe we're dealing with hybrids. Or maybe we're just dealing with gringo face peelers, some sort of an international consortium of very evil men who are out there organ harvesting. I don't know. I suspect they're human, but I can't say for sure. I don't know.
Well, in your investigation, you interviewed one villager who drew a flying saucer craft or some kind of spacecraft. So, how does that relate to this? Is that like the kind of mothership or the original craft that these beings came from?
That's a very important detail, because apart from this hoverboard technology that they have and these discs on the bottom of their shoes, these guys apparently are also flying around in what I can only describe as advanced aerospace vehicles. There you have a picture of it. That individual right there, he's drawing this for me on the acrylic chalkboard, on the acrylic board. He's describing his encounter with this craft. Now you have to understand while you're looking at it, it's an acorn-shaped craft. You're looking straight up at it. So he's describing what he saw. It's directly above him. So that's the perspective of him below the craft. That's the bottom of the craft looking straight up at it. He says that one day at 3 o'clock in the morning, he was out checking his nets, pulling his nets up in the river, when suddenly, he said, it was suddenly illuminated like daytime, like the sun had just come up. He said it was like daytime. And he saw this light reflecting in the water, and he realized there was something above him. So he looks up, and that's what he sees. He sees this craft, and the craft has got a light flashing down on him. And he said that it was about 30 feet above his head. It was very close. He got a good long look at it. He's just sitting there in his canoe looking up at it. And he said it was transparent. It had sort of a transparent mesh. He kept saying mesh, maja. It had a transparent mesh. And that's how he described it. And he said it was shaped sort of like an acorn. And you see those little nubs on the side. He said it didn't have wings. It had these little nubs on the side, rounded nubs that it opened up. They folded open. And that's the position they're in the picture there. They folded open, and they began to deploy a series of rapidly blinking lights as if it was scanning. And then they would fold close. And you see the two little circles inside. One is sort of in the front and one is above his hand there. Those, he said, were people sitting inside this craft. He could see them, one sort of in the cockpit and the other in the body of the craft. And this thing hovered above him for quite a bit of time, a couple of minutes, and he got a really good look at it. And it was just hovering there. And he was obviously quite astounded as he was witnessing all of this at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then he said suddenly it made sort of like a low humming sound, and he saw some sort of exhaust coming out the back, and it just moved away at a high rate of speed, relatively silently, apart from this humming noise. Now, what's amazing is that several people in the village, apart from this gentleman, several village people drew this craft for me in the dirt. They drew this same craft for me in the dirt. And I have that in my video on YouTube. And they described the same thing. It hovering above the village, 30 or 40 feet. They described it. They saw it. It was black. It was not transparent when they saw it. Only this guy saw it transparent. The other guys, it had sort of black body. It had sort of black, matte black body armoring on it. And I myself saw something very similar to this in Brook Park, Ohio, perhaps the same craft. This is the very same craft. So this sort of same description was also seen on Skinwalker Ranch. If you read the book by The Hunt for the Skinwalker by Knapp and I forget the other guy's name, Kelheller, I think was his name. It's very, very, very similar craft that's being described here that I saw that was on Skinwalker Ranch and that these guys are describing here in the jungle in the Peruvian Amazon. So now we're dealing with advanced aerospace vehicles. This is not conventional. So as soon as I realized that we're dealing with technology, I mean, the armor plating, the black armored bodied suits, okay, that can be conventional, state-of-the-art conventional body arming, the body armor. The Russians have it. We have it. I'm sure that the Chinese have it. Okay, that can be conventional. However, these platforms, these hoverboard platforms, circular hoverboard platforms, are not conventional. That's not conventional technology. It's not propellers. By the way, I asked this individual, did you see any propulsion system? Did it have propellers? Did it have engines? He said, no, there were no propellers or no engines, and it was hovering silently above me. He didn't even notice it was there till it turned the lights on, right? And it's quiet at nighttime, besides all the insects chirping at nighttime in the jungle. But, you know, he didn't hear it like the jets or propellers. And it's important to understand that these are the Aikido people. These are the from the Aikido community. But this particular village got about 200 inhabitants. it is extremely remote, and it's a very important village because it's the original Iquitos community. That's where they were hundreds of years ago. That's where their primary village was. So the provincial government in Loreto from Iquitos, they built a government communication outpost in this village. And the reason why that's important is because these villagers have satellite uplink internet in the government building. They all go there in the evening. They sit there and they're on social media or they're watching movies. And that's important because these guys are all aware of, they all know what helicopters look like. They've seen all the same movies. They've watched all the same movies we have. That's why they said that in the initial reporting, they said that the assailants were like the Green Goblin from Spider-Man, because they were familiar with that movie, and the reason why they said that was because of the elongated helmet. If you recall, the Green Goblin from Spider-Man, he has an elongated helmet, and he's got this body armor, and he's floating on top of this thing. That's why they said that, because that's very much like what they encountered, except not green, black, and it wasn't jet propulsion like on the Green Goblin. It was silent, and it was circular, the platforms. So we're not dealing with conventional technology in terms of the technology in the platforms and in the shoes and in these advanced aerospace vehicles. We're dealing with obviously some sort of advanced anti-grav or zero-point energy, something like this, electromagnetic, perhaps, some sort of a technology that is not conventional. And no, it has nothing to do with river miners, and it has nothing to do with cartels. Cartels do not have this kind of technology.
Well, one of the other interesting pieces of information you gleaned from that investigation was there were some villages that you showed an image of an insectoid to, or I think you call it an insectoloid, and you showed that, and they identified it as involved in these incidents. So yeah, what happened there?
Well, that was that incident actually took place in a different village, not even a village, a city. So I was in San Antonio de Pintuyacu. I stayed there for 3 days and 2 nights. Now, I was going to stay there for 5 days, but we cut the trip short. We completed our investigation in San Antonio de Pintuyacu, and so then we decided to take the couple of days that remained to us and go to visit the city of Nauta. Now, Nauta is a large jungle city. It has 35,000 inhabitants. It's the only place you can go by road from Iquitos. And Iquitos is one of the most, if not the most, isolated city in the world. You can only get there by air or by water, by river. So you got to fly there in an airplane or go there in a boat. And Iquitos has a large population. And 2 hours west of Iquitos is, by road, is this city of Nauta. Nauta is a very, very famous place. It's right on the edge of a national reserve, and a lot of tourism in Nauta. And what's important about Nauta, besides the fact that it's got a population of 35,000 people, is it's got an army base and lots of police. So whereas in the village of San Antonio, if you're these face peeler guys, you're going to be confronted with shotguns, right? Bird shot. And by the way, they modified their bird shot too to make larger slugs. They were doing that as well, but you're going to be confronted with bird shot, 16 gauge shotguns, right? But in Nauta, you can potentially be confronted with automatic weapons and helicopters now, because now you're dealing with an army base and so forth, and a Navy base, and the police are much better armed, and obviously the army, the military guys. So that's very important, that context. Now, the video that you're referencing came out around the same time as the video from San Antonio de Pintuyacu. But this video came out from Nauta, and this one features what maybe, possibly, could be a being of some kind. And I originally, when I looked at this video, I thought it looked like an insectolan, what Dr. David Jacobs would describe as an insectolan. Or maybe a very tall gray alien type creature. It's very fuzzy. It's very blurry. It's low resolution. It's hard to see, but it was very intriguing because in the video, and again, I feature all of this in the video I published on YouTube about the after action report I published on YouTube when I got back my YouTube channel. But in the video, you have this chaotic scene at nighttime. There's dogs barking. There's women and children yelling, and you have this guy with a flashlight who trains his flashlight on this tree, and he yells, "There it is! There it is!" And again, apparently, it looks like it could be some sort of a creature. Now, I wanted to go to this location during the day. And again, this is not in San Antonio. This is in Nauta now. So we went back down the river, went to Iquitos, and then got in a vehicle and drove to Nauta. So we conducted a separate investigation in Nauta. I was able to find the location where this video was filmed and to talk to the neighbors. Now, after I talked to the neighbors on the way home, I realized that although this was absolutely the location, no question about it, and you can see that in my video, this was the location where that original video was filmed. I may have been interviewing these people there who had experienced a different incident. And the reason why I say that is because they told me that what they had seen, and I guess another video was taken of this other incident that I probably have never seen, but it was the same spot, okay? They told me that what they saw was a disc, your typical flying saucer that descended over these trees. And these trees are kind of in the distance. You'll see in my video, these trees are kind of in the distance. And at nighttime, you can't gauge the distance there, but in the daytime, it was clear where this incident had taken place. It's clear where they were flashing their flashlights. It's a little bit in the distance, up in this big aguaje tree, and this saucer had descended over the tree, and it was projecting a light down, and that's what these individuals had seen, and somebody recorded that incident. But again, I think that's a different incident than the original one that I was going to investigate, where it looks like there's a creature. And I showed them the video. I showed them, and I asked them, what are you looking at? What are you flashing your flashlight on? And that's when they told me, well, they sort of didn't recognize that video. They said, well, what we saw was a craft. So they were a little bit confused. And that's when I put it together afterwards that, wait a minute, these are two instances, two different videos that happened in the same spot, most likely. And the neighbors who live right across the street, the people I was interviewing had seen the one incident, but not the other. And she even told me, this woman, that they sometimes see stuff over there. Like it's not uncommon that they see craft and stuff in this backyard. And so in my video, I take a still from the original video that's filmed in that location in Nauta, and I analyze it, and I put up a picture of an insectoid, a rendition of an insectoid that compiled by abductees, right? And I think we may be looking at something like that. However, if in fact that is a being up there that they're putting their flashlights on in this video from Nauta, if that's a creature, then it's extremely large because of the distance. And you can see again in my video, it's very difficult to explain it, but you can see clearly what I mean in my video on YouTube. The distance where that being would have had to have been floating in that tree or standing or something in that tree. The size of his head, if indeed it's a head that we're looking at, indicates that being had to have been 8-9 foot tall, at least 7.5. So it was very large. That I know. If it is a being, it's very large. There's no question about it. So I was able to confirm with the neighbors that, yes, they did experience some sort of a phenomenon unfold at that location. They say it was a disc. Again, I think there's two different videos. And I never saw the one that they were referring to, and they never saw the one that I was referring to, although it was the exact same location. So it's I was very intrigued by that incident because I don't know. I'm not saying it's an insectoid, a 9 foot tall insectoid up in that tree. I'm saying I don't know what it is, but it could be because in the video you can sort of see it moving its head back and forth. And maybe that's just a play on the light reflecting off of the tin roof on the, that's in the foreground. I don't know, but it is of interest to note that back in San Antonio de Pintuyacu, on the final night we were there, after we had conducted our investigations, I was sitting on the riverboat, and I was sitting there with some guys from the village and with my security guys, the Peruvian Navy guys. And I said, hey, let me show you a picture. And I showed them a video, and I showed them that video from Nauta. And I said, what do you think about this video? And they're all standing behind me, and Doug's got his laptop open, and he slowed it down on his laptop. And they all said sort of collectively, there's a creature there. There's something there. It's moving its head. What is that? And I said, well, that's kind of what we're thinking. And what do you think about this? And I put on up next to it, I pulled up a picture of insectoid, one of the ones that I think you just had on the screen. And they all just sort of gasped and put their hands over their mouths. And they're saying, oh my God, that's it. That's what's there. That's what we're seeing. And one of my chief security guy, the Navy guy, he looked at me and he said, he was, by the way, these Navy guys accompanied us all around the village. They heard all the testimonies. They were standing right there with us, standing guard in case. Why are they there? They're there because initially I thought maybe this is cartels and stuff, drug trafficking, human trafficking, and it's, a couple of gringos going out there with cameras. It's a good idea to have some security. So that's why they were there. But he said to me, you know what? This is the first time since we've gotten out here that I'm nervous. He said that video is making me really nervous. He said there's something in that video, something very strange is going on, and I'm a little nervous now. In fact, right after he said that, he sent the other Navy guy out to go patrol around the boat with his flashlight. By the way, we brought the villagers of San Antonio, apart from we provisioned them with food and medical supplies, but we also brought them strategic technology. We brought high-powered flashlights, really high-powered flashlights. We brought them radios because they were doing patrols every night. We brought them radios. We brought them thermal binoculars, and we brought them night vision goggles with recording capabilities. And then we trained them how to use all of this technology. And Doug and the Navy guys, remember Doug was an infantry Marine, trained the men who were doing the patrol one night. We were in the building they call the Tombo, that government communications building. We trained these guys how to patrol in a military column. And we also, in addition to training them how to use our technology, and let me tell you something, these guys are not idiots. I mean, they picked it up really fast. And that night they were out patrolling with the radios. We divided their village into 6 sectors corresponding to the radios. And they were out there patrolling their village with the radios, with the night vision goggles, with the thermal binoculars, and with the high-powered flashlights. I was very impressed how serious these dudes were and how quickly they picked up the training. So anyway.
Well, what I find kind of fascinating is that at least the abductee, the female abductee that went through that harrowing incident, I mean, she thought that they were speaking Spanish and that one was a gringo, that all of that overlapped with these joint US-Peru military exercises in that area. So it's like, well, how is that connected? I mean, was that a cover? Were those exercises a cover for a kind of like an unfolding false flag event that's still happening now?
It very well may be. It could be that these guys are out there doing some sort of black ops in the jungle for who knows what reason and decided they're going to go take some trophies. It could be that they're just screwing around, testing their technology. It could be that the military is out there, that the various militaries from these different countries, including the United States, including Space Force, by the way, is actually out there trying to combat whatever this phenomenon is. Again, it seems like a very human thing to me, but I'm totally open to the idea that we're dealing with reptilians in black armored bodysuits, that we're dealing with some sort of maybe even robots. My God, it could be artificial intelligence based on some of the other things. By the way, it's important to also for me to mention that yesterday I called a guy named Pablo Bardales, who lives in a farmstead called a little village called Jorge Chavez, which is on Lake Pucuna near the city of Yurimaguas. Yurimaguas is in the Peruvian Amazon. It's not far from Iquitos. It's between Iquitos and Tarapoto. Yurimaguas is in the middle. I'm very familiar with Yurimaguas. Spent a lot of time there in the jungle around Yurimaguas. I called him up and on his cell phone, and he was in the village when I called him. This individual, he's one of the individuals that experienced the same phenomenon and was hit with a laser and was knocked unconscious and had some heart problems afterward. His story came out in the news, and I followed up on it thanks to a contact on Twitter. And I talked to him yesterday, and he told me the same story. The same story. Their village was there. It's a very little village. It's like a farmstead village on the lake. Their little community was attacked by the same guys, same kind of technology, flying on these circular hoverboard platforms, dressed in black armored bodysuits, the same kind of helmets. And they were attacked a month later in September. So this is after the assault on San Antonio in a different part of the Peruvian Amazon in Yurimaguas. And he actually, what happened was he was bathing in the river, and he was coming back from the river back to his hut, and he had a towel around his waist, and he and his father saw these lights, these circular lights flying around in the sky. And then they saw these guys walking or floating. I don't remember if he said they were floating or not, but they were certainly at least walking around his homestead there. And same kind of thing. He grabbed his shotgun. He even said they were already aware of the pelata phenomenon that had been breaking out in other parts of the jungle. So he started yelling, "Pelacata, pelacata." He grabbed his shotgun. He discharged one of his cartridges at these guys. And then he had one more. He put it in a shotgun. He started chasing them. And he chased them into like a little clearing. And he describes it in the video that's online, that's in which he's being interviewed by the Peruvian press. And he says that he shot him again. And he seems to have maybe disabled or caused the technology that these guys are using to malfunction, because one of them was attempting to ascend into the sky and was having a hard time. And so what Pablo says is that when he saw that this guy was having a hard time ascending into the sky, he ran up to him. And remember, he's in a towel here, a bath towel. He runs up to him and he grabs him by the waist, by the legs, as he's like lifting off the ground. And Pablo's pulling on this guy, trying to tackle him. He's yelling to his father and his friends to come and shoot this guy. And suddenly the guy pulls out a what he calls a little flashlight, but he thinks it was a laser, some sort of a laser, and he hits him with the laser. He hits Pablo with the laser, and Pablo's instantly goes unconscious, and the guy is able to escape. And presumably on the discs on his shoes, right? He said the guys did have backpacks, but it's all of the other details conform exactly to San Antonio. But what's really interesting about Pablo is he actually tried to tackle the guy when he's lifting off the ground, unsuccessfully. And he had some heart troubles after he was hit with this laser. He had to go to the hospital. He had some heart troubles. I think it disrupted the rhythm of his heart or something. I don't remember the exact detail, but very interesting. The same phenomenon, right? But further, southwest in the Peruvian Amazon, southwest from Iquitos. So this is closer now towards the Andes. So that was just another story I heard yesterday. So something very strange. And I want to say that all of this to me is very, very reminiscent to Michael Herrera's testimony, the Marine who came forth with Stephen Greer at his press conference that he did in Washington, D.C. a couple of years ago. And Michael Herrera, of course, this Marine who told this story about encountering this huge football field-sized disc that was hovering in this clearing in the jungle in Indonesia in the aftermath of that hurricane that had devastated the country. And he's there on a humanitarian aid with his platoon of Marines. And of course, everybody I think knows the story. They encounter that disc, and they encounter these paramilitary guys that were better armed than them, that spoke English, by the way, probably ex-military guys, ex-special ops guys. And he had deduced, based on some later conversations he had with some people in the intelligence community, I think, that they were out there running, that these people with this advanced technology were out there running human trafficking operations in the middle of this jungle and in the midst of this humanitarian crisis after the hurricane. So that's sort of how I place the pelata phenomenon, is sort of in that same vein. Very sinister human beings with advanced technology, using it to do the absolute worst things imaginable: harvest organs, cut faces off, human trafficking, which is a nightmare. I mean, that's really a nightmare scenario. It's like Richard Dolan's Breakaway Civilization, and it's like the most sinister villains, like super villains, are running these operations and are in control of this technology. But there also may be a cooperation between this evil faction of humans with a non-human faction. Certainly, the technology seems to be derived from alien tech. It's just, at least from my perspective.
So where do you think this is heading? I mean, is this just a kind of like isolated series of events in a remote area of Peru that's just going to be like that, a mystery to be on that just won't be solved? Or do you think it's building to something? Some people think that this could be something that kind of like sets the stage for some kind of false flag alien invasion. What are your views?
Well, the face peeler phenomenon has been going on for decades, but it's never garnered this much attention. We're living in a different age. We're living in an age in which these indigenous communities have cell phones and satellite uplink, internet uplink. So whereas in the past, the face peelers was just sort of like a boogeyman type thing, now you actually have videos surfacing of different things and encounters. And so they can't operate in the same obscurity as they could before. And I don't know what that's going to do to the phenomenon. What is that going to force? How is that going to affect their operations? Obviously, these guys are not concerned about running these villagers off their land. That's not what this is about. How do I know that? Because the same phenomenon was happening in Nauta. There's 35,000 inhabitants of an established jungle city. They're not trying to run those people off their land. That's guaranteed. Okay. By the way, I didn't say this, but where that video was filmed in Nauta, where I think it maybe could be an insectoid, the neighbors told me that very same night they heard gunshots ringing out around the perimeter of the city. They heard the gunshots. And then she encountered one of the guys that was on patrol around the city of Nauta, and he told her, she said, "What were the gunshots? What was going on?" He said, "We were being confronted with guys dressed in head to foot, black armored bodysuits, helmets, floating on these discs, on these circular platforms, on these hoverboard platforms. Same thing, but in Nauta, 35,000 inhabitants." So I don't know where this is going, but certainly whoever this faction is, human or non-human or a combination of both, they must know that the cat's out of the bag at this point. Do they want that? Are they trying to draw the attention? Are these the original Pelacadas, face peelers, or is this a group doing something else that wants us to think that they're the face peelers? All of these are questions that are percolating in my mind, and I don't have answers except to say that we are dealing with something very sinister. As I said earlier, somebody has advanced, in my opinion, reverse engineered alien technology and is using it to do the most abominable thing imaginable. By the way, not far from Nauta, in another village up another river, I believe it's called Bagazan. I believe that's what the village is called. I don't remember exactly. There was a young boy who was rushed to the hospital in Nauta not long before we got there. It was some weeks before, and this was all over the news in the jungle in near Iquitos, in the Iquitos region. This boy had sustained deep lacerations to his neck under his jawline, just like Talia, but these lacerations, like they were cutting his face off. You can see it. If you can find the video online, I posted it to Twitter. The uncensored, the unblurred video, very, very gory, deep lacerations to the kid's neck. He almost bled out. He almost died. They thank God they got him to the hospital in time and were able to give him some blood and sew up his wounds, and the boy survived. The boy says, what do you think he was confronted by? What do you think happened? Guys flying on these hoverboards, circular hoverboards, black armored bodysuits, same thing. So here's a question we have to contemplate. Are these guys with advanced technology so bad at these kinds of operations that they cannot successfully abduct a 15-year-old girl in San Antonio, and then this adolescent boy who was by himself at nighttime? Are they so bad at their job? They got all this advanced technology. Are they so incompetent that they can't get the job done? Or is something else going on here? Are they intending to leave these victims this way, to perpetrate the face peeler thing, to give them cover for something else that's going on? That's I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, fascinating questions there, and I think that this kind of insectoid connection is an interesting one, because I know that these are beings that are associated with some kind of ancient underground civilization that have been others have researched. I know I interviewed Dr. Anton Anfilov from the Ukraine or Russia, and he said that in 1968 they discovered a craft that had crashed that was brought down by what was it, an S-20 missile, and he said inside it were these insectoids, and the Russians found out that they were an underground civilization and very ancient. So I wonder if something like
the Vril, basically, you know, the Vril mythology of these advanced beings living under the ground that have telepathic powers and so forth. It's very, very intriguing.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he said. He said that these beings that they recovered, that the Russians concluded they had these incredibly advanced psychic and intellectual abilities and technologies. So I wonder if something like that is happening in Peru, that there could be insectoids that maybe have an ancient civilization there, and the military, the US military secret space program are trying to investigate.
Are trying to maybe combat them, but then at the same time, maybe there's a human faction that's working with them. I mean, again, if we sort of combine the stories that I've told you tonight about the Pelacaras with Michael Herrera's testimony, you know, in Indonesia, I feel like we're dealing with the same phenomenon, the same sort of thing, which again is extremely disturbing. Frankly, I was hoping I was going to find aliens in that village, because they would be better off dealing with just extraterrestrials and really nefarious human beings that are organ harvesting and human trafficking. That's like the worst case scenario, especially if they're doing it in cooperation with a non-human species. That's quite frightening.
So what's next for you? What are you working on at the moment?
At the moment, I'm actually getting ready to publish a book of Enoch with commentary and some conceptual artwork and stuff. Really cool. That's going to be coming out this month. So anyone who's interested, and you and I had a discussion about the book of Enoch previously, so people can kind of track with me to see when that comes out. But as soon as I got back, one of the reasons why I wasn't able to stay in San Antonio much longer than I did was because I had a father-son adventure planned that I wasn't going to compromise to Guatemala, where I went and visited some of the Mayan ruins in the Petén region, which was absolutely fascinating. And I've got an event coming up in Costa Rica in February, so I'll be going to Costa Rica in January, and always got something going on. But and of course, I'm continuing to dig into this face peeler stuff in Peru because it continues to unfold. The phenomenon has not stopped; it's just migrated.
Well, I definitely look forward to this new book on Enoch and what that has to say about ancient societies and what's happening today. So I'll look forward to that coming out and having you back on the show to talk about that. So I want to thank you, Timothy, for coming on Exopolitics today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.